Hey everybody, and welcome back to Wednesdays with Watson. If you've been following our journey, by now you know that my name is Amy Watson and I am your host. We called this season of Wednesdays with Watson, PTSD, Jesus, and Me. It has been a remarkable journey as I have had the opportunity to share some of my story with you and also bring in and interweave into that opportunities to help those of you who also may be suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or any trauma, anxiety, depression, all of the things that kind of sit in that same vein. Today, I am super excited to bring you part 2 of my interview with my counselor, my doctor, Dr. Thomas Petit, who I have been under his care for a little over a decade. He is a trauma certified specialist, and today we're literally going to drop into part 2 of the conversation from the last podcast, today focusing on some of the cutting-edge therapies of post-traumatic stress disorder, complex post-traumatic stress disorder treatments. And so this podcast is a little bit longer than the ones that we normally publish, but there literally wasn't a great place for me to cut it, and literally every single word that he says on this podcast is gold in my opinion. You are not going to want to miss what he has to say all throughout the podcast, because by the time you hit stop on this podcast, he will have provided you, the listener, with some tools to handle your own anxiety. It will almost feel like a free counseling session. And so without further ado, we're literally going to drop into this conversation with him. And as I always say, let the healing continue. What I'd like to do quickly, and then I want you to explain it a little bit more, but from the patient's perspective, one of the things that I think everybody in my story will agree about is that the patient, in that case this is me, has to want to not be activated all the time. And I had to want to get better. And that wasn't always true. But by the time EMDR came along, I was ready, laced up for the fight, as I so often say, even though, I didn't need to be in the ring. But I was ready. That first session was not fun. But the way I explain EMDR to my friends, because you're right, if you Google it, it sounds weird, it looks weird, and even in the church, and we're going to talk about it in a few minutes, but it probably comes with a stigma. But essentially, we have two sides of our brain, the right side and the left side. Normally, the way we're created is there's communication. Think of them as roads or highways from the right side to the left side. And when everything is working properly, information travels from the right side to the left side, the emotional side to the rational side. 2 + 2 is always 4 because it just is. But then trauma happens, and imagine the highways getting clogged. And now the very truth of 2 + 2 being 4 cannot get there. So it equals 5, it equals 6, sometimes it equals 3. And so you'll throw around terms like neuroplasticity. And so the purpose of EMDR and some other treatments that we've also used, which you'll talk about, is to open up, to unclog that highway. And if I've explained that improperly, please correct me. But that's the way I explain it to my friends. And we do that by bilateral stimulation, which again is too much to address on a podcast, but essentially treatments that take away the uber pain from the trauma. So now we visit it, we talk about it, we address it, and we process it. And it for me, as a patient, the experience has been, I'm an arm's length away from the pain. And so now what's happening as a result of EMDR and the science behind it, which is where you come in, is that the highways get unclogged. And then suddenly, most of the time, 2 + 2 is 4. Doesn't mean that there aren't times as a PTSD patient where the Lord has chosen to leave some of the struggles in my life that 2 + 2 isn't 3 sometimes. The difference is my community, my church around me knows that. They know, Amy, you're activated, although we don't use those terms, but Chrissy and I call it trauma brain. You're in trauma brain, and 2 + 2 is 3. And so I wanted to just kind of explain how I explain it a little bit, because I know you and I can get a little sciencey. But so there's EMDR, there's rapid response therapy, and then there's TIH. You have a way of explaining this with some color analogies, and those of you that are listening to this, if you're driving, don't wreck, but this is something that you're gonna want to stop and take time and listen to this, because Dr. Petit's real goal in this, besides just getting the word out there, is he wants all of you guys to hit stop on this podcast and feel like maybe you've gotten some help too. And that, and this way you explain this, is so helpful and so practical. And so please explain to us what basically kind of what I just very, layman's terms try to do. But your analogy is beautiful, and I'd love to hear it again.
You did a great job. Yeah. So one of the big differences between talk therapy and these trauma therapies is that they're not. The trauma therapy was largely limited to one of two things. Talk therapy was limited to talking about you and you revisiting, rehashing. And the idea was that if the person got it out, then they would be relieved from it. It would be released, it would be processed, and there is some value to that, definitely. The danger there is there's a lot of reactivation, there's a lot of re-traumatization, there's a reliving that takes some that is not healthy, it's not productive, and So trauma therapies, whether they're EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, RRT, rapid resolution therapy, or TIH, which stands for trauma-informed hypnotherapy, which may sound like a scary term, but it's not hypnosis in the classical clinical regression or anything weird like that. All that's meant is having an effective, updating, integrating conversation with the emotional brain or the subconscious or the unconscious, all same terms for implicit memory. And there's ART, accelerated response therapy. There's a lot more that are continuing to come, and this is just the beginning, because because like you said, it works with the neuroplasticity of the brain. Neurons that fire together wire together, and so.
Wow, I never heard that. That's great. They fire together, they wire together.
Yeah, I can't take credit for that. That was Dr. Hugh that he discovered that. So it's working with the neuroplasticity of the brain, not just to unclog the highways, but to put in bridges, to put in things that go in a different direction than they've been able to go before. So when we think about, our shorthand terms are right brain or left brain. More accurately is probably right mode, left mode. Shorthand terms for the right side would be the emotional brain or the experiential brain. For the left side, it would be the rational brain. It would be the analytical brain. So the right side is holistic. It's creative. It's artistic. It's imaginative. It loves stories and metaphors, and it houses the raw data of things that we live through. So and then the left brain has all the L functions. It's literal, it's linear, it's logical, it's linguistic, it's label making. So they were designed by God to be a team, to work together. So the poor, I say that in quotes, the poor emotional brain doesn't have a voice. It's got sensations, it's got urges, it's got emotion. It can make itself known, but it doesn't have anywhere to put words into it. Put it into words. So imagine, this is a simple, and many of us have been here. A simple imaginary conversation between the right and the left. So the right brain, something happens, and it brings up a stirring, a wave of emotion, let's say anxiety. And the left brain, not having the bridge of connection yet, the left brain notices it and concludes, I just had a wave of anxiety for no reason. Now the right brain, if it could speak, it would clear its throat and go, I know you're trying to help. That didn't help, that made it worse, because now I'm not very good at this logic, that's kind of your field, but I learned this from you. Right brain's still speaking. And it says, I think it stands to reason that if I felt something, there had to be a reason. The left brain go, that makes so much sense. That's really good. Let me try again. Okay, I just felt a wave of anxiety for no good reason. So the rational brain concludes, I just had a wave of anxiety for no good reason. And the right brain goes, oh, yeah, again, I know you're trying to help, but that actually made it worse. The first time I just felt missed. Now I feel dismissed. And the left brain goes, oh, yeah, that makes so much sense. I can see. Let me try again. So the left brain goes, okay, I just had a wave of anxiety for no apparent reason. Now the right brain goes, now you're talking, and now we can communicate, because I'm not aware of why I experienced that or what that's about, but together we can make sense out of this and do something healthy and helpful about it. Our right brain, our emotional brain, so it's always developing. I was going to say, certainly in utero, but I want to go back even before that. I want to go back to inception. One of my favorite quotes is by a theologian by the name of Miroslav Volf. He said, I am loved, therefore I exist. So we were created not just out of God, but out of love. He wanted us. He loved us into existence. And our emotional brain, our emotional self is developing from that moment on. So it's taking things in utero, from the womb. It's taking things in as an infant, it's absorbing things. We are. And the left hemisphere doesn't come on until 18 months at the earliest, maybe 2 years, 3 years, which is why parents with little children, with toddlers, all of a sudden they'll start to get peppered by the what? What is this, Daddy? What is this, Mommy? And then, why is this? I remember we used to go on nature walks with my kids, and man, I would get peppered. What is this, Daddy? Why is it? It's like they got a superpower, because the left hemisphere, the part that can process this, is coming online. I have 2 little granddaughters, one who is just about ready to turn 4 and one who's about ready to turn 1. And so the 4-year-old has...
all the whys.
Oh my gosh. all the connections are flowing, and little is just kind of still taking it all in. She's just absorbing it. And so this is a perfect example of what we're after is integration. You're getting these things.
And when you say integration, just for clarity's sake, that right side talking to that left side properly, and then both agreeing and not fighting each other. Like, yes. Why are you acting that way? That's dumb. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So technical definition, functional definition of integration is the healthy and helpful linkage of differentiated parts. So the best way to think about this is a symphony. So when the musicians come on stage, they're warming up, they're going through, they're loosening up their chops, they're tuning their instruments, they're making noise. That's chaos. So that's all differentiation. There's no linkage. And then the oboe plays a singular note, and all the instruments tune to the oboe. They play that same note. That's rigidity. That's too much linkage. There's no differentiation. Thankfully, the conductor comes out, opens the master score, and each musician plays their part in harmony, in concert with one another. That's integration, where it's like this. So, Dr. Siegel, in his book, The Whole Brain Child, tells a story of a little 2-year-old. And his nanny, her name was Sophia, and he loved Sophia. And he and Sophia were on an outing, and they got into a car accident. Everybody was fine, but mom was called and showed up on the scene. Ambulance came, and Sophia went to the hospital to get checked out. Again, everybody was fine. Well, so it raises the question: this little one just went through a trauma, right? Yeah. So how do you help him? And the mom began to notice he just kept repeating "Ia woo woo, Ia woo woo, Ia woo woo." Knowing her son, she knew Ia was his name for Sophia, and Woo Woo was his describing of the accident. He was trying to tell the story, but he didn't have
The vocab. Yeah.
yes, so he needed Mom to weave the story in there. Honey, that's right. You and Sophia were going for a ride, and then this happened, and then remember when the woo-woo came, the ambulance came and took Sophia to the hospital. So, and then he'd go on with more of the story. Yeah, hospital, yeah. And then remember when we went to see Sophia? Yeah, and Sophia's fine. Remember? And then remember when you did this with her? Yeah, Sophia fine. And once the mom wove the story into the emotion on behalf of the little boy, it was done. It was restored.
Such power in words, right?
Yeah. So back to our little. So I like to think in terms of working with the Spirit of God and with others to promote integration, where so it raises the question. We talked about trauma earlier. What is healing?
Oh, wow. That was not on my question list there, Dr. Pettit. You're throwing me for a loop there.
So healing is clearing, releasing, updating, and integrating. Like with that little boy. He cleared it out. He got to express it, wove the story in. He got to realize it's not still happening. Everybody's okay. And then he was back to playing with his toys and slept the night through, and just, and it was something that had happened, but it wasn't still happening. It was clear, released, updated, and integrated. And what they're finding is at the heart of trauma healing is participating in a new meaning mismatch transformative experience. A new meaning mismatch transformative experience. Not just to reconsolidate the memory in real time, but in a way that helps us to move into action that which we were prevented from doing before. So the little, and this is what you were referring to, the way I like to view it is...
Get ready, guys. This is amazing.
With 4 colors. So the reason for the 4 colors is because taken together, they present a clear, concise, accurate, accessible, user-friendly view of our interior world, what goes on inside of us, and what to do about it, which is pretty cool. So the emotional brain already loves the colors, and the rational brain loves the structure. So we've already got this thing going here. So I like to view the emotional brain when it's got some stuff that hasn't been processed yet, some stuff stored. I like to view it a little bit like a volcano that has its base, in our tummy, like right around our solar plexus, kind of goes up over our heart and then up into our brain. And so that volcano, we're going to make it red. So let me back up a step. I remember in my EMDR training, my first day, the trainer said something so helpful. She pointed to the left side of her head. She said, we've all had this experience, and what do we try to do, or what do we tell people to do? So right here, pointing to the left side of my head, I know X or Y to be true or untrue. But then we point to our heart. For the life of me, I can't get this to make a difference now.
So the 2 plus 2 I know is 4,
yeah.
But here it's 3. And I'm hitting my heart. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so she said, what do we attempt to do or tell one another to do? And it's basically some form of try harder. Try harder to act as if, fake it till you make it, memorize things, meditate things. Again, all can have some degree of helpfulness, but when we're honest, they don't have the effect of actually feeling the truth of what we know to be true. Like, I know that God loves me. but I don't feel that. I feel unworthy. Even.
Unloved.
Yeah, unloved.
Yeah.
I'm unwanted. So you raised the question that kind of set the stage for what we were going to do. What if that's just the best languaging we have to say something that is more like this? Here on the left side, I know something to be true or untrue, and then pointing to the right side and the heart and the tummy. What if there's something over here that's telling a different story? And what if there were a way to get these two on the same page?
Integration.
Yeah, that's integration. That's what trauma work does. So the way I like to view it is the emotional brain being like a bit of a volcano. So that's the red. So the red is being activated or in a reactive state. The green is being in the resting, responsive, receptive state. So right now, you and I are in the green.
Right.
We're having a important conversation. This is interesting. We know that the reason we're having this conversation is because God has been with us, and there's been benefit. You have a desire in your heart for your listeners. So do I. To benefit likewise. That's why we're doing it. So we're in the green. And yet, if while we're in the green, somebody were to knock menacingly at one or the other of our doors, guess where we're going?
Red.
We're going red. Yep, we'd be activated. And it would only mean two things. It would mean we're human and we're healthy. It wouldn't mean what a part of us thinks it means, that there's something wrong with me. Because the way God made us is we get activated, we go red when there's either a real or a perceived threat. And our emotional brain can't tell the difference. I mean, we don't know. I don't know if someone's trying to get in here or if someone or Ruthie needs some help or something.
Right.
But either way, I'm going to go red, just like our gazelle. And so what happens, and we'll get a little technical just for a second, is when we experience real or perceived threat, the amygdala, middle of our brain, sounds the alarm. It turns on the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic branch to fight, flight, or freeze. It activates the hypothalamus to produce all the stress hormones, primarily adrenaline and cortisol. And what the adrenaline does is it sears and seals in the experience so that the cortisol then takes the rational brain offline. Yay, because the gazelle gets activated and she runs and she gets away from the cheetah. If that didn't happen and she starts to think, wait, was that a cheetah or was that then yeah, we know what happens. And so imagine when we experience that. And so a little bit of agitation, a little bit of nervousness, a little bit of anxiety can be kind of like volcanic ash, or a little bit of irritation. But sometimes it can be like a lava flow, where it's a focal and panic attack, or where it's a loss of temper. We literally flip our lips. The mid-prefrontal cortex goes offline in order to get us safe or to take whatever action is appropriate. And so imagine it being like a lava flow. So then imagine a little yellow bridge. Now I'm pointing to the right side of my head, going up right above the volcano, right side of my head, into the middle. And I'm drawing a little circle on my forehead, and that represents the blue. So now we got three colors. We got red, yellow bridge, and blue. So the blue and in the forehead, we're going to call that our place of integration, our place of healing, our safe place, our calm place, a place where we go to connect with the Lord and truth and our true selves. So now imagine that blue being connected with a reservoir of blue beneath the volcano. In John 7, Jesus said, "Whoever believes in me, from their inmost being will come streams, springs, rivers of living water." And he was speaking of the Holy Spirit. And what's interesting about the term inmost place, when you dig into the Greek, it means ravine, low place, cut place, wounded place. You dig deeply enough, you get into the word wound. So that cut place, that wounded place that we want to stay away from reflexively, there's inside that is where those rivers, those springs of living water flow. So every time we go to the blue, we're drawing that water up. Every breath in, we're drawing that water up through the volcano, cooling the lava, creating little caverns for excavation later with little treasures, little things to uncover, little things to cherish. And then that blue flowing up through the red over the yellow bridge creates green. It literally affects a left shift in the brain. Now imagine that blue and that green flowing on top of the volcano, irrigating, vegetating, putting in rivers, streams, lakes, ponds, parks, playgrounds. So we've got treasures on the inside of the volcano with cool lava. We've got lakes and rivers and parks on the outside of the volcano. And it paints a picture of working with the Spirit of God and with others to transform our interior world.
So, as a lover of words and a writer, I'm so glad to actually have this on a recording, because even 12 years into my own healing, just thinking about drawing in that living water, the sea, the Jesus, and what's so important to me. And we might be adding a fourth one, because a fourth C, which is really synonymous with Christ. But you brought something up that my creative brain, which, to use one of my favorite sentences that you use, you shouldn't be able to do that. And so the very fact that I can be creative shows healing, right? But immediately as you were telling me, think of it as an orchestra. Well, immediately, my ears perked up because I love that music. But the composer. And so when we think of God who made us in his image, Genesis 1:26 and 1:27 tells us that he made us in his image. Psalm 139, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. But there's a little bit of a rub in some of these things that we've talked about today and what we call the church. Now, when I say that, I mean the overall attitude that there may be some stigma or some taking the composer out of the healing when you use some of these cutting edge therapies. And that bothers me for a lot of reasons. It's one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast, because, we preach putting your hand to the plow and don't look back and all kinds of things. But yet very few in leadership understand these kinds of things, unless they know me. And I know some pastors and pastors' wives who go, I can't wait for that podcast because I've watched it.
Yes.
So can you add anything to that before I ask you my final question? Can you add anything to why, or what can we do to stop the stigma from people listening to this, or the church, or the world in general? Because anytime you're talking about the brain, people get weird.
So, Amy, you're doing it. This podcast is doing it. I mean, not just this specific one, that's part of it, but all that you've been doing this whole series, you're doing it. And I think the simplicity is you think of the way God has revealed himself through his word. Mm-hmm. So we read the words on the page in John 10:10. We read two powerful sentences. I am the good shepherd. And then we read a little bit later, I am the gate. It's like, wait, you're both? How cool is that? So not only are we reading words, but we have pictures in our mind.
Right.
Words and pictures. It's integrated. It's the words are for the left brain, and the pictures are for the right brain. So God revealed himself in ways that he knew that we needed. So that's at the heart of it. And like with me, I had an unexamined fear of science.
Oh, wow. That's a great way to explain that, an unexamined fear of science.
Yeah. As if science doesn't lead us to him and to knowledge of him and worship and awe of, like you said, from Psalm 139, you are fearful and wonderful made in us.
Well, and just this, I don't know how, even if we use Philippians 4:8 as our litmus test for some of the cutting edge therapies, they are all of those things. Yes. And I do think that our testifying of such healing is what it's going to do to take it to the streets. And so if somebody is behind a pulpit, ignorantly so, because we're believing the best in them, saying, throwing a Bible verse at it or name it, claim it, then stuff like this and an opportunity, for those of you listening, it's a Saturday afternoon at 2:00. I'm on vacation, and Dr. Petit went into the office to do this. Is how important it is. But so I want to end by asking this, and certainly if you have more to add, but I've always wondered, I've never actually asked you this question. What's it like on your side of the desk, for lack of a better way to explain that, after I think it's about 30 years in this field, to watch the promises of Joel 2:25, not only in my life, but this is my podcast and it's my story, so I'm going to ask you about my life, but what is that like for you? And as we are in a global pandemic where we've all received big T's, has it ever provided hope for you in the great composer? When you look at a story like mine and you look at a verse like Joel 2:25, where I will restore the years that the locusts have stolen. I'm just really curious on a personal level what that's like for you to see.
It is unimaginably rewarding. It's an awesome experience to witness and participate in the healing, restorative work that the Spirit of God is always doing. It has nourished my faith. It's strengthened my hope. It's purified my love. It's I love the scene in the last battle when Aslan has come back, Caspian's bad uncle has been overthrown, the real king has returned, and there's the procession, and the kids and all the animals are hanging from the lion's mane, and they're proceeding down the street, and all of a sudden the lion stops next to this little cottage, and he sticks his head into the frame and lifts it up. And there on her sickbed is the nurse that raised Caspian in the ways of old Narnia. And I love her words. These are the words, when faith finally becomes sight. She said, Aslan, oh Aslan, it's you, it's really you. It's really true after all. I have that experience. I've had that experience countless times with you. Another way I put it, and we've shared this before, is what I call Trinitarian popcorn moments, where something just comes together in real time, where there's a dawning. Like, I remember for you, when the first EMDR session we did, you realized, it hit home. I deserve better.
Yep. And now for listeners, and so that was the first truth weave. And so the beauty of a Christian psychologist and my being in Christian counseling for the past 12 years is we both agree, Dr. Petit and I both agree, that the Bible is the absolute authority, but these opportunities to have these moments in there, but yeah, to bring it back to Joel 2:25 and my love for all things Narnia and for Aslan. And although the quote that immediately popped in my mind as you were telling me that story, I think is actually from The Lord of the Rings with Tolkien, where I think it's Gandalf that says, will there ever be a time when all the sad things become untrue? And that's been my experience. The sad things are still true on this earth. But committing to what I have hammered home from the very beginning episode, which was called Healing That Doesn't Make Sense, And even with all the science, the only way it makes sense is by this great redeemer of the years that the locusts have stolen. And so it continues to be a journey. I can do things and live life in ways that I never thought possible. For those of you listening and wondering, I wonder if Amy's still in counseling. The answer to that question is yes, because it's that important. And so for those of you listening out there who feel like there is no hope, there is great hope. If my story can bring that to you, and some of these things that we've talked about today can bring that to you, then this has been all worth it to us. Do you have anything to add, Dr. Petit?
I actually do. Just wanted to share with your listeners what I refer to as the secret sauce of transformation, of integration. It's two questions, and then the second question has two parts to it. So the first question is when we're experiencing something, whether it's in real time or something that we've been affected by in the past, to ask ourselves or ask a loved one, what does this feel like it means? What does this feel like it means? It's a strange little question. Our rational brain tries to change that. What do I think it means? No. But our emotional brain goes, ooh, call on me. It means I'm worthless. It means I don't matter. It means I'm no good. It means I'm not good enough. And then the second question goes a little bit deeper. What would you love to experience instead of that? Oh, that I'm absolutely good enough, just as I am. Then the second question breaks down into two. Okay, what word or word communicates that? The emotional brain can only understand 1 to 3, 5 words at a time. So if we memorize a verse, that's a great thing to do for the left brain. But we want to highlight, like, the word good enough. Yeah, that. And then we ask the question, okay, what pictures you being good enough? What pictures that for you? And that picture and that word become our blue. So the little yellow bridge has 2 guardrails: shift focus and strengthen breath. So we acknowledge it. There's a wave of anxiety. Okay, so any activation that we experience, any emotional state, any emotion, it always carries with it a request for action. Like anxiety is run, hide, take cover, get safe, avoid, pull the covers over your head. Anger is, in the animal kingdom, dogs bare their teeth, sharks send out their teeth, rams put their head down and butt. So the action is to make something bad stop happening. Well, what we're doing with that yellow bridge is we're giving our emotional brain always has something to do. Oh, all this means I'm activated. It means I get to go to the blue. So I shift my focus onto whatever that picture is of me being good enough. And let's say that was just the arms of the shepherd kneeling down with the arms wide open. That's the picture. The word's good enough, so sensing the Lord whispering those into my ear. And I go to that blue, and while I'm there, I just shift focus. I focus on that picture, and I breathe that in. And perhaps attach those words to my breath. Good on the inhale, enough on the exhale. So shift of focus and strengthening breath does a lot of cool stuff. It turns off the activation. It turns off the sympathetic nervous system, turns on the parasympathetic. It reconnects the mid-prefrontal cortex. And one of the cool things it does, shifting focus and strengthening our breath, is our brain secretes its own gamma aminobutyric acid, its own natural Xanax. It just has a calming effect. just by doing those two things for anywhere from 15 to 60 seconds. And the reason for that is that it allows for a new firing pattern. That's enough time. And then every time so then that can be woven into one's sleep hygiene.
Right. And you had mentioned, and mine was I Deserve Better, my first EMDR, and that's where I was headed. And when I get a trigger from trauma or new trauma or this basic, I often describe it as I wake up in about 3 feet below sea level and I have to climb myself up just to my basic Psalm 139-ness, that I am fearfully and wonderfully made and that I exist because that I'm valuable because I exist. One of the things that EMDR has done for me is when that happens, those words pop in my mind. That particular EMDR session was about my domestic violence trauma. And as the highways are getting unclogged, I never would have thought I deserved better before. But they got unclogged or getting unclogged, continue to get unclogged. And yeah, that is a basic truth. That is Genesis 1:26 truth. I deserve better because I am made in the image of God. He made me to thrive on this earth and to live an abundant life. And so that's how effective, not only that's my first session, and so that's the one that is strongest in my head, but there are numerous truths because that's my version of 2 + 2 is 3. I didn't think I deserved better. I thought I deserved all of those things that has happened to me. And so when we flip this back around to my question about the stigma with the church and stuff, I just really hope that there are people out there, and we will be bringing on a pastor's wife onto the podcast about ministering to those with PTSD. But because we are living in 2020 in a worldwide pandemic, and I am concerned about what's going on right now, but I'm really concerned about what goes on a year from now. Because what this has done, what all of the things that the pandemic has brought, is put us all in the red all the time, unless we know how to cross the yellow bridge and expand our breath and shift our focus. And that's why this matters. That's why I have put so many tears and hours into this podcast. It has been difficult, but it has been worth it because that's why it matters. Because there's people listening to this are going to hit the stop button and go, and here's your words, wait, what? Oh? But close us with that. What is that? That is such a cool experience. The wait, what? Oh,
yeah. Thank you for that, Amy. Because you again, the left brain. We talked about updating and integrating and all this stuff, and the rational brain loves that. But when those 3 words, wait, what? Oh, that's the experience. That's the experience of the right brain getting a new message. So imagine you're out for a walk and just enjoying the stroll, and all of a sudden you just stop dead in your tracks before you even know why. You just stop. And then you wonder, okay, why did I just stop? And then you realize that out of the corner of your eye, you saw something long and squiggly on the path, really close to you. So your brain read that as snake, and it commandeered your body to keep you safe. So when you look back at it with both eyes, you take that in, and you provide yourself with a wait, what? Oh, that's not a snake, that's a stick. And it's done, and your emotional brain is good, it did its job, it's at rest, and now emotional brain and rational brain are together, and they look at that thing together, and they go, you know what? That's an incredible walking stick. That's just our height. And you grab that stick and you incorporate it into your walk. That's the wait, what, oh experience.
And I love it so much. I have it all the time. It's like, if I journaled it, I would go through legal pads full of wait, what, oh moments. And that to me is just the snapshot of healing, of continued healing, and how unexpected it was and how it doesn't make sense. But it does make sense because here's the other thing. We do the 3 C's because, yes, one of them is Christ, but he is the star. And he has provided He is the star of this story. He is the star of my journey with you. He will continue to be the star of my journey, and not only in counseling, but in whatever is next. And so I just want to thank you for taking the time to come on with us today, because I know that this is going to be so helpful to people. And we're going to get it edited up. Like I said, I did a poll and asked, which do you want first, my counselor or the series that we're going to drop on the pandemic? And overwhelmingly, people wanted to know, how are you okay? Having their own version of, wait, what? Huh? Now, I want them to have a wait, what? Oh. And know that we serve a star of the story who will provide opportunities, who will provide a Dr. Petit in whatever way, because my provision of you is very untraditional. We know that it is a sacrifice, but I do know that for those of us who want help out there, there is help, even though it doesn't make sense. So thank you so much for coming on today, and you'll continue to get.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Well, guys, I hope that you have enjoyed these two podcasts with Dr. Petit as much as I have enjoyed bringing them to you. It was quite the honor that he agreed to come on to the podcast, and this one in particular, he really wanted to leave the listeners with tools that could help you as you walk through your own traumas, and whether that be a post-traumatic stress disorder trauma or just the everyday traumas of living in this world. So we are so grateful for him. I hope that you will come back when you need to be reminded of the star of the story and how he can use such great tools that have been given to us, to counselors, in helping with post-traumatic stress disorder and trauma, anxiety, and depression in general. I hope that you would consider sharing this podcast with somebody. That does help us come up high in the search engines, so that people who would never get the opportunity to hear a message like this may stumble onto the podcast. You could do that simply by subscribing, by leaving a reviews, by hitting some stars, or by sharing it on your social media. You could find my social media, Facebook and Twitter are both Amy Watson Author, and my Instagram is Author Amy Watson. Often you will see posts on there that are easily shareable, but especially these two episodes, if you know someone who could benefit from a doctor like Dr. Petit doing what he did for us, please consider sharing. Until then, I look forward to spending some time with you guys in a couple weeks. As usual, I'd like to thank the amazing Amy Highland for producing this episode, and again, Chrissy Lothridge for helping us with the audio, since this was our first remote interview. You guys have a great couple weeks, and as I always say, let the healing continue.